All right. This is You Can't Make This Shit Up. We are broadcasting from Central Florida, Washington Manor South. I'm David. This is Dan. And hey, thank you for tuning in, being a part of our community. We encourage your comments, your likes, and please spread the word. We would like to grow our community, be a part of our community, look at our content, share our content, comments. We're all over the different socials. So, gonna jump right into it. The Biden administration recently proposed a new rule that would make 3.6 million more U.S. workers eligible for overtime pay, the most generous such increase in decades. The recommended salary threshold is a generous increase from the Trump administration's 2019 threshold recommendation. Why such a large recommendation? Dan and I are going to take a look at the economics. Let's go. What say you, Dan?
Um, I I have mixed feelings. In general, I
Okay.
think I almost feel like it's the wrong proposal. In the sense that I question whether or not when you look at salaried workers and then you look at hourly workers, if it would be more productive to ask when someone starts a job before they sign a contract, hey, um, do you feel like you're going to work harder at this position than we're requiring? Do you think that you're going to put in overtime? And if so, then you're kind of creating a pool of two different types of workers where you have people who are going to do the bare minimum and people who are going to work above and beyond what's required of them. So I think I, there's a lot of different things where I feel like it should be proposed differently, or it could be proposed differently. Um, I don't necessarily think it has to do as much with the money as it does with the quality of work being put forth.
Okay. All right. I know that when I used to manage teams back in Illinois, our workers were unionized. So there was a salary threshold, and that overtime was automatic because it was worked into their contract. And then, but for the managers and the supervisors, we worked all kinds of hours, knowing that, well, I'll speak for myself as a manager, knowing that I wasn't going to be compensated until then Governor Rod Blagojevich decided to allow managers and supervisors to be unionized. And so that was worked into the contract where we too would qualify for overtime. It made the job uh, a, a little less stressful because we were compensated for our time. And also, it built in the efficiencies for the managers and supervisors. Now that we qualify for overtime, our superiors were very concerned about the amount of time that we spent on doing our job, despite the fact that we knew that it was more than just a 9 to 5 job. So they had to manage that a little bit better because we were making a lot more than our workers. And so the overtime costs would be more. So some systems were put into place to limit the overtime, and thus limit the cost to the state. So I would think that for a company or a business would be prepared to anticipate a certain level of overtime in their budgets when they sit down with someone to start contract negotiations, so, or salary negotiations, so forth and so on.
Right. So you're essentially saying that it's already somewhat built in that when you sign a contract to work with a company that you're expecting to work these overtime hours, correct?
That they would have a budget for overtime, yes, a
Okay.
certain amount of overtime.
Because I have a similar experience from um the workers aspect of it. I worked construction 2
Mhm.
years ago, and it definitely encouraged the workers to put in the overtime hours since we were all hourly employees.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think that from a if you're being paid salary and I mean, if you're a manager, you're gonna make more than probably your employees, even with their calculated overtime. but you have more responsibility, obviously. So I think
Right.
it definitely needs to be something that's specified in a contract. So maybe it needs to be more of a preemptive thing rather than like an afterthought.
I
In
like
that
that.
sense, I don't think you should oversell or undersell how hard you're planning on working your employees.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that because there were times where my subordinate was making twice as much as I was making because of the overtime. And they had the option to take on more overtime. And that was that was the abnormal. What's the word I'm thinking for? Anomaly. That wasn't the rule. But they were willing to take on the overtime when it was needed, when others wouldn't want the overtime. But there were folks who made, a lot of money year after year, and they did the work and they were compensated. For us managers, you're like, wow, we put in even more time because we're supervising that person who's doing the overtime, but we didn't get compensated. One of the issues I have is, on average, the threshold that the Biden administration is looking at is about $56,000. That is above the median income for U.S. citizens or U.S. workers. I know this will be very beneficial for the hospitality and leisure industry. So I think that's very positive. I think there should be more discussion about this, so that the rules are not abused or the opportunities are not abused. But I like the fact that this does help the leisure and hospitality industry when they seem to be further behind in compensation than other industries.
right. I would definitely partially agree with you.
Okay.
Because I I feel that in order for people to reap the benefits of this, you still have to put in the work. So I'm not gonna, sit here and say like you shouldn't work harder because obviously that's what a lot of people feel that this country is built on. So, you know, by all means, put in the extra hours, but I do stand by the idea that, it could definitely be abused. And I feel that how you're saying like a supervisor has to watch over um the employees who are putting in their overtime, but then who is watching over the supervisor
Good point.
in a sense, like I've worked for supervisors who don't lift a finger. And so then it's frustrating when, they're already getting paid salary to pretty much do nothing and then they get overtime because I'm busting, you know?
I
So
hear you. I've seen it myself. Yes.
yeah. So I think that as long as it's not being abused and it's being used for the people who are working really hard to, get their job done and taking pride in their work, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I agree with you. There are abuses, and I believe a business that is aware of its costs, its expenses, will put into place those efficiencies that will monitor those extra overtime costs. Um, it's something that I think all businesses should be considering, and understanding that a lot of people, will take advantage of the situation. However, I think the vast majority of people would actually do the work and benefit from the work, on both sides, the employer and the employee. Um, yeah, for those who supervise those that new level, that new salary threshold of workers, maybe it'll be a good cause for them to seek pay raises themselves. And,
Right.
and essentially, this is what it is. It's a pay raise.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree.
There we go. We're in agreement there.
Yeah, I yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it.
Okay.
I feel like I've expressed my concerns and the potential benefits, but um yeah,
All right. There you go. Final word.
All good.
It's all good. That's Dan. He's all good. This is David. This is You Can't Make This Shit Up. Please like, share, comment. This rule is just a rule right now that's being recommended to increase the threshold for overtime for a certain class of employees. We'll love to hear what you have to say. Managers, subordinates, C-suite level, whatever. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.